Okay, let's unpack this. We are about to dive into really the company that holds the literal key to modern civilization. Think about it, the most advanced tech in our lives today. AI models, complex neural networks, autonomous cars, 5G, those new smartphones. To build any of that whole sophisticated world, you need these incredibly advanced semiconductor chips. And well, to make those advanced chips, you need one specific, ultra-precise machine. Only one company in the whole world makes that machine, ASML from Holland.
Yeah, the scale of this company's influence it's genuinely staggering. We're talking about an entity that wields economic weight rivaling the GDP of major nations. And its technology effectively dictates the speed, the direction of the global tech roadmap. It's huge. But what we're looking at today, and this is based on some really insightful analysis from Tenenbaum, is this profound paradox. You've got a company with an unbreakable absolute monopoly.
Echo control.
Exactly. But it acts less like a cutthroat capitalist giant trying to squeeze every penny and more like, almost like a quasi-ethical European government agency focused on stability. It's very strange.
And that is the core puzzle we're trying to solve for you today. ASML holds the ultimate leverage.
Mhm.
I mean, the key to the future of technology, but they seem to refuse to use that power to maximize profit in the way you'd expect. So why? Why would a corporation sacrifice potentially massive wealth? That's the big question driving this deep dive. Is it genuine altruism, maybe? Or is it actually some kind of hidden strategic mistake?
Well, Tenenbaum's analysis really highlights three central paradigm-shifting developments that are redefining ASML's position right now. And these aren't just, minor market fluctuations. These are collisions of culture, core business strategy, and some really intense geopolitics threatening the very foundation of this monopoly.
Okay, so let's start by really defining your power. I mean, this company is, frankly, more important than many entire countries when it comes to tech access.
Yeah.
We need to get a grip on the mechanics of its dominance before we talk about how that power is being, well, so profoundly challenged now. Right. Let's start with the definition. The monopoly.
Yeah.
ASML is the only company that builds the machines needed for modern AI chips. We're talking about extreme ultraviolet lithography EUV systems. Without these specific machines, high-end chip production just stops globally. There's no alternative, right?
Yes.
No substitute.
None whatsoever. And it's crucial to understand this dominance wasn't an accident, it wasn't inherited, it was deliberately engineered over decades through some extremely high-stakes technological bets. ASML has quite an interesting background. It's a spin-off from the old Dutch electronics giant, Philips. Based down in the south of Holland, its founding team was this core group of mathematicians and physicists really obsessed with precision optics.
And the roots of their success, it seems, are tied directly to some really key early decisions they made. Back when they were starting, the market for chip manufacturing equipment was totally dominated by powerful Japanese companies, like Canon mainly.
That's right, Canon, Nikon, they were the leaders.
But ASML saw something different coming. They bet everything on a different path, didn't they? This EUV and deep ultraviolet DUV technology, it was unproven then.
Exactly. While the Japanese competitors, who were, let's face it, pretty comfortable with their existing methods, they kind of dismissed EUV, said it was too expensive, too difficult to actually make work commercially. The Dutch team, they went all in. And they combined this huge technological gamble with an incredibly unique, and you have to say brilliant, long-term business strategy. They basically decided to reinvest virtually every single dollar they earned straight back into R&D.
Wow. Okay, so what's the result of that relentless R&D strategy? What did that actually achieve?
Well, it created this self-reinforcing cycle, almost an inescapable technological lock-in. By constantly pouring resources back into R&D, they just widened the technological gap between themselves and everyone else year after year, until eventually they became the only supplier capable of delivering these highest-end systems.
And the lead now is?
The estimates Tenenbaum cites suggest they're somewhere between 20 and 25 years ahead of any potential competitor, and that includes massive state-backed efforts, like in China. It's a staggering lead.
Let's talk about the tech itself for a second, because when we say machine, it sounds simple, but we're talking about engineering at the absolute limits of physics, aren't we? These systems use light, this extreme ultraviolet light, to literally project and etch the circuitry onto silicon wafers.
The precision involved it's hard to even conceptualize. And these machines don't just use light. They need these incredibly specialized mirrors to focus that light. And those mirrors, interestingly, are manufactured by a critical German partner, Zeiss.
Zeiss, right, the optics company.
Yeah. And what's fascinating about that supply chain detail, Tenenbaum points this out too, is that the most critical piece of optical tech needed for the most advanced American Taiwanese chips, it comes from a German company that actually has its roots back in East Germany. It just shows how globalized and frankly how fragile this whole supply chain really is.
And physically, you hear these stories.
Yeah.
How big are these things?
Oh, they are massive. We are talking about machines roughly the size of a city bus or maybe like a small jet engine laid on its side. Huge. They're so incredibly complex they can't even be shipped whole. They get broken down into dozens and dozens of crates.
Oh, way.
Yeah, it takes multiple jumbo jets just to transport the components to the customer's factory.
And the time it takes to build one.
Tenenbaum notes it's between 1.5 years just to build one machine before it's even installed and calibrated on site.
That sheer scale. I mean, that engineering feat translates directly into massive economic and political weight for the Netherlands, doesn't it? ASML is now the largest tech company in Europe.
By far. And their domestic leverage is immense. Consider this. They pay more taxes to the Dutch government than the next 3 largest companies combined.
Wow. Including who?
That list includes energy giants like Shell. So yeah, their contribution is enormous, and that level of financial contribution gives them a unique status naturally. But it also means that when, say, Washington calls, or Beijing, they're not just calling a corporation, they're calling an absolutely essential pillar of the Dutch economy. And that subjects ASML to pressures that go way beyond standard corporate concerns.
Right. It's not just business anymore. It's national interest.
And that brings us directly to the first major shock Tenenbaum identifies in his analysis. ASML's pricing strategy is radically unconventional. When you possess a technological monopoly that is, for all practical purposes, unbreakable, the textbook economic answer is simple, isn't it?
Yeah, you charge whatever the market will bear. Maximize profit.
Exactly. But ASML's choice seems to be heavily influenced by something else entirely. Its roots in Dutch corporate culture.
Okay, so we talked about Holland's generally egalitarian society, the developed welfare state, this strong tendency towards ethical policymaking. Are we saying ASML actually applies those national values to the cutthroat world of global hypercapitalism?
It really appears that way. Let's look at the numbers. In purely economic terms, ASML sells its absolute state-of-the-art lithography machines for a price that ranges from, say, $250 million to $300 million each.
Which sounds like an insane amount of money.
It does, until you consider the alternative, or rather the lack of one.
Wait, hold on. If ASML is the only game in town, what did Tenenbaum suggest they could realistically charge for these machines?
His analysis suggests that because there are simply no functional alternatives anywhere in the world, ASML could easily charge, wait for it, $3 billion per machine.
$3 billion. That's 10 times the current price.
10 times. And the analysis is clear. The market would absolutely bear it. Think about it. If ASML refused to sell, the supply of advanced chips, the kind needed for the entire AI revolution, for everything would just dry up instantly. TSMC, Samsung, Intel, they'd have no choice. They would have to pay whatever ASML demanded.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, it runs counter to pretty much every business school lesson I ever heard. They refuse to exploit this incredible power. If they charged $3 billion, they'd make 10 times the revenue. They could potentially dominate global market caps. Why on earth would they turn down billions upon billions?
Well, the reported rationale is strikingly simple, almost naive sounding. They state, quite publicly, that they want their clients.
Want their clients, what does that mean?
It means they don't consider it ethical to just jack up prices simply because they have the monopolistic power to do so. They say they prioritize stability and long-term relationships over short-term, massive revenue maximization. The thinking seems to be that exploiting their position too aggressively would destabilize the entire semiconductor ecosystem that they ultimately rely on.
But isn't that just bad business? If you're a shareholder, surely you want maximum profit.
Right.
Not corporate ethics.
Precisely. And that's the tension. From a purely financial viewpoint, Tenenbaum actually describes this ethical choice using the Spanish word demential, which basically translates as demented, insane.
Invented.
Yeah. And look at the market consequence. While their main clients and partners, companies like TSMC and NVIDIA, saw their share values double, even triple, during the recent AI boom, ASML's stock price actually dropped significantly. It went from over $1,000 a share down into the $600, $700 range, and it stayed there for quite a while.
So their moral stance directly hit their market value. Shareholders must have been furious. Did that cause a major revolt or anything?
It certainly creates a huge amount of tension, you can imagine. What Tenenbaum's synthesis reveals is that ASML effectively sacrificed massive potential market capitalization for this self-imposed moral standard. It's a genuine rarity, isn't it? Where corporate culture seems to actually override the pure capitalist instinct.
It really is.
However, there might be a strategic angle to this self-limitation too, even if unintended. By keeping prices relatively affordable, at least in chipmaker terms, they ensure the stability and the rapid growth of your clients, and that in turn guarantees future sales for ASML and continued investment back into their own R&D. So they arguably chose a stable, indispensable role over a violently lucrative one.
Okay, maybe not completely demented then, but still unusual.
Definitely unusual. But this very ethical stance, this sort of sense of being above the fray, might have inadvertently set the stage for the strategic vulnerabilities that Tenenbaum points out next.
Right, that sets the context perfectly for the second major development Tenenbaum highlights. This is the Mistral maneuver. And this takes us from corporate ethics straight into the messy world of geopolitics and Europe's, well, crippling AI deficit.
Yeah, if you just look around at the major AI companies today, the key developers, OpenAI, Google, Meta, now Grok, they're overwhelmingly American, aren't they?
Mostly U.S.
Right. China's fielding its own big contenders too, obviously. But Europe, despite having incredible strength in foundational areas like ASML's lithography and physics, it's largely missed the boat on this initial AI wave. Europe's last really significant homegrown contender is Mistral, a highly touted French company, and it's heavily subsidized by the French government.
Okay, so Europe's got Mistral. And then ASML, this company focused laser-like on physics, optics, light manipulation,
Yeah.
suddenly becomes the largest shareholder in Mistral, this generalist AI company. They invested something like $2 to $3 billion, right? That seems completely out of their lane. Wildly so.
It does seem odd on the surface. Now, the stated rationale for this acquisition is very specific. ASML claims they bought into Mistral primarily to apply AI technology to optimize the internal production processes for their own incredibly complex lithography machines.
Using AI to build the machines that build AI chips.
Sort of. They want to use large language models, LLMs, to potentially streamline manufacturing, maybe improve service and diagnostics. That's the official line.
Okay. But the critique of that rationale from Tenenbaum and others is pretty devastating, isn't it?
It is. The analysis likens this move to buying a whole cow just to drink one glass of milk.
Okay.
The investment seems wildly disproportionate to that stated goal. ASML is hyper-specialized technology. Getting deeply involved in the general LLM business, which needs massive data sets, completely different talent, different infrastructure, it looks like a significant and possibly a really damaging diversion of resources if that was the only true goal.
Right. It just doesn't quite add up from a pure business perspective. So, if the business case is shaky, the real reason must be geopolitical, surely. Is this basically an act of political necessity, European solidarity, driven by pressure from the Dutch government, maybe the EU as a whole?
That seems to be exactly the implication from Tenenbaum's analysis. Europe simply cannot afford to miss the AI train completely. It's facing this nightmare scenario where, unless it acts decisively, its own foundational hardware, the chips enabled by ASML, ends up powering American and Chinese AI brains. The deep fear is that if Europe doesn't have its own AI champion, it becomes technologically vassalized, just a provider of components.
So ASML, the continent's technological crown jewel, is essentially being leveraged as the financial savior for Europe's AI ambitions.
Precisely. Because Europe largely missed that first AI wave, this huge investment looks like a last-ditch attempt. It's trying to connect ASML's undisputed technological might, its vast cash reserves, its immense influence, with the last remaining major European AI player, Mistral. It's really an effort to prevent total technological derailment for the entire continent. ASML is acting, perhaps reluctantly, as the Team Europe benefactor here, dedicating billions to what looks like a political objective, not really a core business one.
But that forces their management, their engineers, to dedicate precious time and money to something that looks like a strategic error, doesn't it? I mean, when you're dealing with technology so complex that a year's output needs a fleet of cargo planes, can you really afford to dilute your focus with a massive, speculative AI investment like this?
Well, the critique Tenenbaum presents says basically, no, you can't. ASML's unique strength lies in its singular, obsessive focus on optical physics and precision engineering. Dedicating billions in capital, and probably more importantly, management focus, to a general LLM. An area where they have absolutely zero competitive advantage is viewed as a serious strategic dilution. It looks like it's driven by political necessity, not sound core business logic. They're being forced to act like a political entity, which is probably not what their shareholders originally signed up for.
Okay, so this political maneuvering might be a significant distraction, but the third development, Tenenbaum dissects. This sounds like an almost existential threat to ASML's core business model, and it's coming directly from their single most important client. This is where TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, basically turns the tables on ASML.
Yeah, TSMC. They are the undisputed colossus of contract chip manufacturing. They are responsible for making something like a staggering 92% of all the advanced AI chips globally. Just think about that number.
92%.
Wow. And crucially for ASML, they are the most important buyer of ASML's EUV machines. They account for roughly 70% of ASML's total output. 70% goes to TSMC.
So the relationship is absolutely foundational. ASML makes the indispensable key. TSMC uses that key to unlock pretty much all of global technology. What happened recently to break that simple model?
Well, TSMC is renowned for its own incredible engineering prowess, right? They don't just operate the machines, they optimize them constantly. And recently, the revelation came out. Tenenbaum details this, that TSMC took ASML's incredibly sophisticated, multi-million-dollar lithography machines and somehow improved them dramatically. In computer terms, it's kind of like what we call overclocking, pushing a system well beyond its official design limits to get superior performance.
Okay, overclocking multi-hundred-million-dollar machines. What were the actual results? What did they manage to achieve?
The improvements were astonishing, far beyond what anyone, least of all ASML, probably thought was possible. Improvement number one, which is pretty significant in itself, is that they optimized the operating procedure so the machines now use 25% less energy.
25% less energy.
Yeah.
That's huge, given how power-hungry these things must be.
Absolutely massive savings. But it's the second improvement that fundamentally changes the game for ASML's entire roadmap.
Okay, what was the second one?
This is the central, almost devastating revelation. TSMC figured out how to increase the productivity, the throughput of each individual ASML machine by 30 times.
Wait, did you say 30 times, not 30%?
30 times, 30x, not 30%. It's an almost unbelievable figure.
That analogy from Tenenbaum's source, taking a basic Fiat car and somehow turning it into a high-performance airplane, that really captures the sheer magnitude of it, doesn't it? TSMC didn't just tune the machine slightly. They essentially re-engineered its operational capability, presumably through software and process innovations.
Exactly. And the implications for ASML were immediate and, frankly, devastating. See, ASML had been operating on this model of planned obsolescence. They were busy developing their newest generation machine, designed to create chips at the 1.6 nanometer scale. That's a step down from TSMC's current cutting-edge 2 nanometer chips. ASML naturally, based on history, expected their biggest customer, TSMC, to upgrade immediately. They assumed TSMC would need the smaller dimensions.
That was the whole business model, right?
Yeah.
Smaller, faster, must upgrade.
Yeah.
But TSMC didn't upgrade. They just optimized what they already had.
Yeah.
So what was ASML's reaction when they found out?
Well, according to Tenenbaum's account, when ASML management went to TSMC, presumably expecting a huge order for the new 1.6 millimeter machines, TSMC delivered the punchline. They basically said, "We are not buying it. We don't need it."
Ouch.
Yeah. They had achieved such exponential performance gains through their own efficiency and innovation that they completely bypassed the need for ASML's very expensive new hardware upgrade.
This really sounds like a profound management failure on ASML's part, looking back. We can see two distinct errors sort of colliding here. The first was maybe that ethical pricing we discussed earlier, potentially sacrificing capital reserves they might need now. What's the second, more immediate strategic failure here?
The second error looks like a catastrophic failure of, well, market anticipation and basic client communication. ASML management apparently made the decision to go ahead and manufacture this next generation, incredibly high-cost machine without confirming a purchase commitment from their single most important client, the one who buys 70% of their output.
That level of, well, strategic hubris, maybe. It seems almost unheard of, especially for a technology monopoly that depends so heavily on one customer.
It really is. And the necessary self-reflection inside ASML must be brutal right now. Think about it. If your end user, TSMC, can take your supposedly ultimate machine and improve its output by 30 times, then you, ASML, are clearly missing something fundamental in your own understanding of its operational design potential, its efficiency limits.
Right. It fundamentally attacks ASML's core business model, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That model relied on the perpetual need to shrink chip dimensions.
Exactly. For context, China is currently struggling to get to 14 nanometers reliably in advanced production. Current AI chips are maybe 5 or 3 nanometers. TSMC was already using the 2 nanometer process. ASML offered 1.6 nanometers. We're talking measurements approaching the atomic level accuracy here.
And for years, the whole industry narrative, driven by ASML partly, was that you had to go smaller to get faster. Moore's law depended on it. ASML's revenue certainly depended on that belief.
Precisely. ASML's entire expectation, their whole multi-billion-dollar R&D bet, was that the industry needed to go smaller to keep up. And TSMC just proved them wrong. They showed that 2 nanometers is perfectly sufficient, maybe even preferable, if you can increase the efficiency by 30-fold through other means. This just obliterates the perceived urgency for that 1.6 nanometer upgrade. And it puts enormous strain on ASML's massive R&D investments in that new generation. They built it, and their main customer said no thanks.
Okay, but let's not completely discount ASML's remaining leverage here, because this is where the geopolitics and the crucial service component come back in, right? Even with this incredible TSMC optimization, ASML still controls the maintenance, don't they?
That's absolutely critical. It might be their saving grace, for now. ASML's secondary business, maintenance, and service is essential to the stability of this entire ecosystem. These EUV machines are unbelievably fragile and precise. If they are not maintained, recalibrated, fine-tuned every 2 weeks, literally every fortnight, by ASML's own specialized personnel, they rapidly degrade. They essentially turn into chitara, as Tenenbaum's source put it, just scrap metal.
Every 2 weeks. Wow.
Yes. The high frequency and the extreme specificity of that maintenance requirement gives ASML immense ongoing control, even if they aren't selling as much new hardware right now.
And we see that leverage demonstrated pretty starkly with the China situation, don't we?
Exactly. Since China was banned largely due to U.S. pressure from receiving ASML's maintenance services, any of the advanced EUV machines they might have acquired previously are now essentially useless bricks. They can't operate them reliably.
So that demonstrates that ASML's service, their specialized knowledge, is just as vital, but maybe even more vital in some ways than the initial hardware itself. This service lock-in is maybe the only thing preventing TSMC from becoming completely autonomous from ASML.
It's a powerful lever, absolutely. It means the game isn't over. But the power dynamic has fundamentally shifted. So ASML's battle with its main client, TSMC, is just one axis of pressure they're facing. The other, constantly looming, is geopolitical. Tenenbaum's analysis strongly suggests that Europe, and by extension the Netherlands, where ASML is based, increasingly acts as a kind of vassal state of the United States, especially in strategic tech matters.
That sounds harsh, but is it just theory or is there evidence for that?
Well, it's rooted in a certain reality. Europe relies pretty heavily on U.S. protection, militarily and strategically, particularly given ongoing conflicts and tensions with Russia, for example.
Right, and this reliance means ASML's big strategic decisions are rarely purely corporate decisions anymore. They're often dictated by Washington.
That seems to be the case. The major decisions like banning sales of the most advanced machines and, crucially, banning maintenance services to China, these appear to be mandated directly by the U.S. president, whether that's Biden or Trump. The order comes from Washington, it's conveyed to the Dutch government, and the Dutch prime minister basically executes it domestically, forcing ASML to comply.
So ASML doesn't really have full autonomy on who its customers are.
It seems not, on the most critical geopolitical issues. And the fragility of ASML's position is kind of palpable. ASML operates out of essentially one primary mega factory complex in Veldhoven. But Tenenbaum notes, rather pointedly, that this factory is conveniently located right next door to one of the largest American military bases in Europe.
Oh, interesting detail.
Yeah. That physical proximity kind of reinforces the strategic reality. The company might be legally Dutch, headquartered in Holland, but its operational security and ultimately its political fate seem fundamentally tied to the U.S. government's geopolitical interests. They are a protected asset, yes, but maybe also a controlled one.
Okay, this whole geopolitical dynamic also helps us understand some of the market noise we've seen lately, doesn't it? Particularly the dramatic movements around Intel.
Yes, absolutely. The recent news that NVIDIA invested a massive $5 billion into Intel that caused Intel's stock to spike dramatically, sometimes 20 or 30% in a single day. And this is Intel, a company that, let's be honest, has faced significant structural challenges and execution problems for years now.
So why the huge investment from NVIDIA?
Well, this move, as analyzed by Tenenbaum, is framed largely as a patriotic act. Or, using a specific term he highlights, Luftgeschäft.
Luftgeschäft. Okay, we need to define that for the listener. What does that mean?
It translates literally from German as air business. But the meaning in this context is more like A deal or a transaction based primarily on hype, political signaling, or future promises, rather than immediate, tangible commercial substance or results.
So it's more about appearances.
Kind of. NVIDIA relies heavily on global supply chain stability, and they definitely need to stay on the good side of the U.S. government, especially regarding semiconductor security and reducing reliance on Taiwan. So this investment looks like NVIDIA complying with, or at least supporting, the U.S. desire to shore up Intel to create a stronger domestic alternative. It's good politics.
It's like a political handshake disguised as a massive corporate investment. But the crucial question is, does this $5 billion investment actually change the game for NVIDIA's own chip production needs?
Not really, not yet anyway. Tenenbaum points out that the investment seems focused mainly on shifting some of NVIDIA's CPU workload, likely from ARM-based designs, over to Intel's manufacturing. It is not confirmed, and seems unlikely in the short term, to lead to Intel manufacturing the really critical high-end GPUs that are the heart of NVIDIA's AI dominance.
Ah, okay, so it doesn't solve NVIDIA's core manufacturing dependency.
Not directly, no. It's fantastic PR, it's great geopolitical theater, it makes it look like the U.S. is rapidly solving its supply chain vulnerabilities by boosting Intel. But the immense technical challenge of getting Intel's factories up to speed to produce those cutting-edge NVIDIA AI chips reliably, that remains a huge question mark. It's mostly air business for now.
Right. Okay, so all this geopolitical pressure combined with the ethical pricing dilemma we talked about earlier, it comes together to form Tenenbaum's final point, doesn't it? The issue of ASML's internal culture, maybe its institutional ego, what you called its hubris.
Exactly. ASML's decision not to participate fully in the ruthless capitalist race, this almost messianic belief they seem to have about teaching ethical values to the market. Ironically, that might have created a critical vulnerability. They perhaps started to believe their own hype, believe their technological supremacy was an absolute unbreachable shield.
And that arrogance, that hubris, caused them to completely miss the possibility that their biggest client could innovate around their core offering.
It seems so. They assumed the only way forward was the path they dictated. Smaller and smaller chip dimensions, buying their next machine. They failed to seriously account for the possibility of a client like TSMC drastically optimizing the current technology instead.
When you're supposedly 20 or 25 years ahead, maybe you stop looking over your shoulder as much. You assume your lead is unassailable.
That's pretty much the definition of hubris in this context, isn't it? It's maybe the moment they stopped being the relentless innovator constantly pushing the envelope and instead became the slightly complacent dictator of the technology roadmap. And that blind spot allowed TSMC, who are under intense competitive pressure themselves, to achieve this incredible engineering feat that completely disrupted ASML's planned obsolescence model.
And finally, there's that fascinating detail Tenenbaum highlights about the actual people driving this industry at the highest levels, this unexpected ethnic dimension.
Yeah, it's a really intriguing observation. It turns out there's this unexpected unifying thread among the leadership. The CEOs of arguably the world's most powerful semiconductor companies, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, who's Taiwanese, Lisa Su of AMD, who is actually his cousin, key leaders at TSMC itself, and even a critical figure at ARM, who is Chinese from Malaysia. Tenenbaum describes them as effectively exiled Chinese or Taiwanese figures. It points to this remarkable concentration of talent and influence within a specific cultural and ethnic network that's driving global chip innovation. And notably, they seem to operate with a degree of agility and focus, perhaps largely outside the direct political constraints faced by more government-aligned corporations like ASML seems to be becoming. #tag outro.
So where does this all leave us? What does it all mean? We have this incredibly powerful company, ASML, that seems to have sacrificed massive potential market power, billions of dollars, for a sense of corporate morality, only to then have its biggest, most crucial client turn around and surpass its core technology by an almost unbelievable 30 times in efficiency.
The conclusion from Tenenbaum's analysis is pretty stark, and it's a timeless lesson. All companies, no matter how dominant, eventually face this moment of challenge. The greatest risk, time and again, is hubris. It's that arrogance, that complacency that gets rooted in past success. We've seen it happen to countless industry giants before, and it appears to be challenging ASML right now. When you stop being the undisputed god that dictates the entire technological roadmap, it becomes exceptionally difficult to maintain morale, investor confidence, and your market position.
Right. ASML has definitely been humbled. Their business model is clearly strained. But the game isn't completely over, is it? You could argue it's still sort of tied, maybe 0-0. ASML still holds the key to the future generations of chips, anything below 2 nanometers eventually. And maybe more importantly, as you said, they still hold the absolute key to the maintenance and service needed to keep even TSMC's hyper-efficient current machines running.
Precisely. That's the crucial point now. The power dynamic has shifted dramatically. It's gone from a clear seller's market, driven by ASML's planned obsolescence, to a much more delicate, complex interdependency. It's now based on high-frequency innovation from both sides and ASML's essential service provision. TSMC just proved that the holder of the physical key isn't the only one who can unlock the next level of performance and efficiency.
But they still need ASML to come around and turn that key reliably every 2 weeks.
Exactly. The dependence remains, but it's mutual in a way it perhaps wasn't before.
And that leaves you, the listener, with this provocative thought to maybe mull over. Consider whether, in this age of intense geopolitical tension and fragile global supply chains, it's truly possible for a critical, foundational technology company like ASML to ever be genuinely independent. Or is its fate, regardless of its own intentions or technological brilliance, always going to be fundamentally dictated by the strategic policy decisions of the world's great powers? Can a company that important ever truly control its own destiny?